1932, and a new Parliament building opens at Stormont on the outskirts of Belfast. A Protestant Parliament, the Union secure in stone and in ceremonial. Throughout the political upheavals that had led to the partition of Ireland, the government of Northern Ireland had remained loyal to king and empire. While the rest of Ireland had won limited independence, the Union Jack waved in Northern Ireland. Protestants took pride in the fact that their unionist government had resisted all attempts to draw them into a united Ireland. Save for the curious, there were few Catholics in the crowd. Catholics in Northern Ireland, 1/3 of the population, looked to Dublin as their true capital. In the Irish Free State, Catholic influence had increased in almost every walk of life. The special position of the Catholic Church would later be formally recognized in the written constitution. The 1932 Eucharistic Congress. Mass celebrated in Dublin's Phoenix Park. The Pope's representative, the bishops and politicians all together. After centuries of quarrel, there was peace now between Britain and Ireland. But the price was a divided Ireland. The 26 southern counties of the Irish Free State, renamed Éire in 1937 and almost completely independent, and Northern Ireland, though it had its own parliament, still part of the United Kingdom. Now separated by an international frontier, North and South were moving further apart. With separate economies, laws, and social order, the troops and police were supplemented by customs officers. Partition had become a day-to-day reality. Agriculture was Northern Ireland's most important industry. But Ulster farms were smaller than in other regions in the United Kingdom and in the rest of Ireland. In the 1930s, it was hard to make a living from the land, and many country folk were forced to move to the towns and cities where jobs were also in short supply. In the countryside, the pace of life was slower, and Protestant and Catholic had to help one another at busy times of the year. Life in the city ghettos would be very different. Behind this picture postcard scene, the reality of Northern Ireland in the 1930s was one of rural poverty, high unemployment, high death rates from disease, and a daily battle for survival. Add to the brew long-nurtured hatreds and tough competition for jobs. Would the government at Stormont ease the growing tensions in a bitterly divided society? Some politicians on both sides made their sectarian preferences plain. Sir Basil Brooke, the Minister of Agriculture in 1933, advised unionists to employ only Protestant lads and lasses.
Oh, that was one of the statements that I made and regretted. And I remember Lord Shawcross making a very wise remark that all politicians sometime during their career either say or do something they regret. But you must understand that the circumstances were pretty difficult. I was at that time Commandant of the Special Constabulary here, and I was informed on very, very good information that the Roman Catholics who were employed by me to the tune of somewhere between 12 and 15, I can't now remember how many, were to be used in the kidnapping of my eldest son. And I believed it to such an extent that he was never allowed outside the gate. I used to put it entirely differently nowadays, but at that time, naturally, I was very hurt for one thing. I knew quite a number of them. They were friends of mine, the RCs on the farm, and I would never put it in that way now.
The Orange Order had been founded in Ulster in the 18th century to defend Protestant interests and to celebrate the victories of William of Orange over the Catholic King James II. The Orangemen marched every 12th of July. Catholics always resented this display of Protestant triumph, and in 1935, rioting broke out in Belfast.
Belfast was like a city under martial law, following the worst riots for many years, which left their mark like a scar across the map of Ulster. The trouble arose as a party of Orangemen were returning from Battle of the Boyne celebration.
For over 200 years, British soldiers have had to assist the police in restoring order during the summer marching season.
Shop windows were smashed, houses were burned. 36 people were injured and 2 were killed. The presence of armored cars, however, had a sobering effect on the local temper, and after the storm reigned comparative peace.
In Belfast, where sectarian quarrels are a part of everyday life, it is inevitable that those given the job of keeping the peace find themselves in the middle, often attacked by both sides. Since the 1920s, the Royal Ulster Constabulary, supported at times of tension by British troops, has had that unenviable job. Armed police and armor-plated vehicles are nothing new in Ulster. Once, perhaps only once, there was a difference. In the early 30s, faced with grinding poverty, Catholic and Protestant took to the streets together to demand more generous government handouts.
Property, of course, suffered disastrously in the riots. Extensive damage was caused to shops and banks, glass windows being an incitement to destruction, and displays of foodstuff a provocation to looting. Municipal property was an especial target. A curfew was imposed from 11 o'clock at night to 5 in the morning, and order was gradually restored, but only after unfortunate casualties had occurred. Meanwhile, conciliatory efforts were being made to remedy the cause of the trouble, which is understood to be due to the difference between rates of relief in Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
That brief moment of harmony in adversity had its roots far from Ireland. The American Wall Street crash of 1929 sent financial shockwaves around the world. Stock market share prices tumbled. Newspapers spread the news across the Atlantic, and the panic of the United States' economic collapse became a worldwide epidemic. Even in the most advanced industrial countries, employers closed their doors, and poverty and hunger stalked the streets. In the boardroom, fortunes evaporated, and workers faced the prospect of starvation. Britain, too, was not immune. With unemployment in the once thriving shipbuilding town of Jarrow in the north of England approaching the 60% mark, the workers took to the road in the now famous March to London. Their demands were for work and for dignity and a new political order in Britain, a system in which they might have some say. It was a call that was echoed in the factories and mills of Belfast, where a predominantly female labour force clung to their jobs as the World Depression pushed Northern Ireland's economy into crisis. In Northern Ireland, Catholics were twice as likely to be unemployed as Protestants, and in hard times, the struggle for jobs often made sectarian tensions worse. There were a few economic successes. Gallagher's cigarette factory maintained production at a relatively high level. The firm's managing director was able to talk of cigarettes racing along as though imbued with the spirit of the chase. Not so in the other manufacturing giant in Belfast, the shipbuilding firm of Harland and Wolff. They did not launch a single ship in 1932 or 33, and workers found themselves and their families dependent on bankrupt public relief schemes. With spare engineering capacity, Belfast was an ideal centre when Britain began to rearm in the mid-30s. Short's aircraft firm set up in the city, but the new jobs made only a small impression on unemployment, then running at record levels. Under mounting pressure, the Stormont government gave way on welfare relief payments. But Prime Minister James Craig had little to offer by way of economic remedy.
I would like to say that any observer of world conditions must realize that there is an unsettlement prevalent in many countries, due doubtless to the state of finance, of trade and of industry. But whatever it may be, there is no doubt that from time to time people are apt to do certain things, to take action which in normal peaceful times they would never dream of. And it will be a sad day if any country suffers from a mischievous action of any single individual or any body of individuals.
Working class unity was a clear threat to Unionist authority, and Craig appealed to traditional loyalties to bring Protestant workers back into line.
We are part of Great Britain. I think I am right in saying we are the most loyal part of Great Britain. And all Ulster men rejoice in the close relationship between the mother country and ourselves.
In 1935, Protestant Ulster was in mourning. Edward, Lord Carson, the man who had threatened violence when Irish independence seemed likely to win favor at Westminster, was dead. Protestant Unionists turned out in their thousands as his body was returned to Belfast for burial. Although remote from Ulster politics for 15 years, Carson was still a hero. But their presence on the streets as his body was borne on a gun carriage was more than just respect for a past hero, an old leader. His honored grave in St. Anne's Cathedral was a symbol, a strengthening of the resolve, a way to show Southern politicians that the border was there to stay. Within 2 years, Protestant spirits were to be lifted. The coronation of King George VI prompted a royal visit. Amid tight security, the Republican menace was still widespread. Their Majesties disembarked to a tumultuous welcome. In spite of poverty, unemployment, and poor living conditions, the well-scrubbed Protestant working people turned out in their thousands to cheer. Under the blue skies of a British Ulster, Protestants were anxious to demonstrate their gratitude for what were in truth the economic scraps from Britain's table. At Belfast City Hall, seat of the first Northern Ireland Parliament, the comfortable middle classes and the Unionist politicians seemed anxious to demonstrate that all was well within loyal Ulster. Once again, the Catholic population decided to stay away. Ex-servicemen were honored. A reminder, if reminder was necessary, of the sacrifice of Ulstermen in the service of the Crown at the World War I battles of Passchendaele, Ypres, and particularly the Somme. It was a message not lost on the royal party or the British government which directed proceedings. His Majesty laid a wreath at the cenotaph honoring all those who had died, Protestant and Catholic. The king was cheered to the echo. Meanwhile, south of the border, the ruling Fianna Fáil party, founded by Eamon de Valera, was moving towards full independence. In 1937, he produced a new constitution, claiming sovereignty over the whole island, including Northern Ireland. De Valera moved the recovery of the lost territory to the top of the agenda. The 1921 treaty, signed in London, had kept the Irish Free State within the British Empire. Bitterly opposed by de Valera at the time, he now attempted to persuade the British to leave Ireland and to allow both parts to move back together. But with war in Europe looming, Britain was anxious to maintain its strategic foothold in Northern Ireland. So de Valera returned home empty-handed, his dream not realized.
Ireland united, Ireland free, Ireland self-supporting and self-reliant, Ireland speaking her own tongue, and through it giving to the world our ancient treasures of Christian Gaelic culture. These are the ideals to which enthusiastic young Ireland is now devoting energy.
The new constitution, with its claim of sovereignty over Northern Ireland and the prospect of the South withdrawing from the Empire, spread shockwaves among Unionists in the North. Ulster would have no truck with such political parleys. And in order to demonstrate her determination to resist any weakening of Britain's resolve on the Union, an election was called. The border was to be the sole issue. Unionist candidates called for a fresh declaration of Northern Ireland's determination to remain part of the United Kingdom. And English cinemagoers were treated to a somewhat quaint demonstration of Ulster politics in action.
Republic, is it? Let them try and get Ulster into the Republic if they want to fight in their hands. Ulster's loyal to the King, God bless him.
The outcome was inevitable, and a larger than usual Unionist majority was returned. A source of considerable satisfaction for the Unionist leadership. In spite of outright Unionist rejection, the end to partition remained the dominant issue in Irish political life.
This program aims at restoring the unity of this island and creating an independent Ireland living its own cultural, economic, and national life. We do not wish to seek quarrels with any country. We wish well to our neighbor, Great Britain, as to all other countries. We want our liberty so that our cooperation with Great Britain may be one of harmony and friendship.
Harmony and friendship was far from apparent as the decade ended and Europe prepared for war. Germany, defeated in the Great War, had risen from its knees and was on the march. Under the charismatic leadership of Adolf Hitler, the Third Reich was using its military muscle to take over disputed territory in neighboring countries. The invasion of Poland in September '39 was the last straw for British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain.
This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note, saying that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.